Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your host, Aalia and Amen.
Hello. This is Aalia and Amen, your host, Unsugarcoated with Aalia podcast. I'm very happy to be here today, despite all the crazy things that continue to happen in our world. But you know what? I'm just glad to be here and be able to be a voice and a person who wants to help create change. And I'm lucky enough to know some amazing individuals who have the same passion. But before I bring them on, I want to mention something. Recently, I had a misunderstanding with my friend. It was actually over the weekend. I read a text she had sent. I misunderstood and I became defensive. I'm just going to say that. I didn't know that then, but I pretty quickly figured it out. I took a step back and I realized that this breakdown in communication was not just about my perspectives and my feelings, and also I needed to consider hers. In the end, I avoided a potentially much bigger, needless argument and salvaged my friendship in the process. Now, I'm telling you this because, it is important that we all take a step back and recognize what we do and how we're behaving in these moments. I wish that we didn't live in a society where people largely react or do things in a moment without rationalization. I can't speak what was going on in the officer's mind, Derek Chauvin, as he pinned down George Floyd and mercilessly killed him, but I can say for certain that it was a lack of respect for his right to dignity. It is part of a pattern for people of color, and in the recent weeks, we've observed footage of Ahmaud Arbery attacked and killed during a run in his neighborhood, which took months for police to actually take legal action. We've seen a white woman, Amy Cooper, blatantly lying, call the police, hysterically screaming that a black man is threatening her life. Some may find my words dramatic and feel like I'm stoking a fire, but I'm not. I'm just here to have the conversation, and I'm here to do it unsugarcoated. Because if you're a person of color, this makes you feel like you have a target on your back. I have to warn my kids about what life is like there in a world where I know not everyone, but certain people will have a preconceived notion based on the color of their skin. It is important to me that this platform is used to give voice to people with powerful stories, but furthermore, individuals who go out into the world every day to create positive change. That positive change that you keep saying is getting lost in this message right now. There are the ones who are changing the narrative because there is for sure more than one. I've invited not only men of color to join me today for a conversation, but men who grew up in South LA in an era where fuck the police was the mantra. But they didn't become thugs. In fact, they are both hugely dedicated to community relations and empowering young men and women growing up as these events continue to unfold. Now imagine you're the one telling these youth how much potential they have, how the world is changing, accepting them, going to accept them if they do what's right. We have famous black athletes, actors, musicians, distinguished positions, and so forth, and yet they turn on their TV or they open their social media, they see another person of color getting killed in broad daylight by a police officer. What do you say to those kids? How do you convince them that all of this is worth it and there's hope? I don't know, but I know the men to ask today, and let's ask them. Amen Rahh was born and raised in Compton, California. Today, he is a certified trainer of trainers in restorative justice by the Institute of Restorative Practices. He has served the Los Angeles community as a teacher, assistant principal, and now he serves it as the founding principal of University Pathways Public Service Academy, which aims to educate, empower, and enable all students to become agents of change. Ladies and gentlemen, Principal Rahh. Now we have B.J.Abron, who has received numerous recognitions for his work as a trial attorney, including numerous awards and recognitions as Top 40 Under 40 and Top 100 in the state of California, as well as Super Lawyer Rising Star. When not advocating for his clients, he is a coach for Southwestern Law School's Trial Advocacy Honors Program, inspiring the youth in the community at large, and serves as the executive board for multiple organizations, including Downtown Los Angeles Bar. Please, everyone welcome B.J.Abron.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you for being with me today and having this conversation. So I've read your bio. I'm just going to start off by asking, Principal Rahh, how do you feel today, this week, this time frame? What kind of emotions are you going through, personally as well as an educator?
First, thank you for having me. But this week, these last couple of days has just been emotionally draining, been fatigued, been angry. And it really what I hang my hat on is what just quoting James Baldwin, to be a black man in America and conscious, you're walking around angry and frustrated all the time. And I think during this time, is really manifested to not just an educators, but to people who have a moral compass that what's going on at the climate of this country, you become emotionally drained, fatigued, but also through different to see the camaraderie also in the bright spots that's going on, you become empowered and inspired to actually continue to fight. So it's been a mix of emotions. Nonetheless, it's been a mix of emotions of just angry, upset, frustrated, but also at the same time inspired and empowered and grateful to be able to be in a position that I am to collaborate with a friend, a brother, BJ as a lawyer, both growing up in the same neighborhood, to
I
come
think we have a
together
picture of
and
that, by the way.
do things and do our role as black men to pay it forward, but not only pay it forward to our people, pay it forward to people all across the nation, but people that come from different races. It's important for us to educate not only our own and give liberation to our own, but also provide really awareness, education to white people, to Latinx, to Asian, and all different diverse people, so they can understand the human right issue that's been violated, but also how we move forward with a plan of action. So it's all those things together, nonetheless.
Yeah. Now, BJ, you and I hope the picture got put up. I think it did, because you guys have known each other. You're both from Compton. You
Right.
an attorney in civil litigation today, fighting for the rights of others and people.
Right.
How do you feel today?
I mean, I think Amen hit it on the head pretty much. I feel devastated, in part, even though there's something that we've seen time and time again, the level of devastation never diminishes.
Right.
Even though you kind of understand and expect these kind of things to happen, because we understand that the social justice, the parameters that allow for this to change, for this to happen, have not changed. And so you always feel devastated. You feel enraged. You feel confused in part, right? Especially someone in my field where I represent, as you indicated, the wrong. There are people in my field also who do the same thing that I do, don't understand the perspective. They don't understand what we're going through every day. And after the last killing, we may march a little bit, we may get back. I don't get to take off this skin color. I still deal with this every single day. When I walk into board meetings, when I driving in my car and the police drive by me. This is something that exists and it's not going away until we force it to go away. And so for me, it's something that's it's upsetting to deal with. But I think there are some positive aspects, especially today, that we are seeing out of the protests, because we do see a lot of people coming together. Of course, and we can get into some of the intricacies of what's been going on actually on the front lines of the protests. I've been down to numerous protests, and we can talk about some of the elements of agitation that are being presented to the protester to try and play on their emotions and, make them kind of act out on those emotions. But, it's a time that is challenging, but the reality is it's no different than the marches that we had in Selma. It's no different than the marches that we had with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. It's no different. Things have not changed.
Right. And I want to say something to that, because, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, because a lot of people, especially non-Black people, love to bring up Martin Luther King right now and how respectful and how peaceful he was. And as, I shared with you when I had recently seen the peaceful protesters that were just shoved out of the way so that, the president could go take, and this is not about Trump, by the way. I'm actually not even gonna, it is, but it isn't, like, as far as leadership, but I'm here to, this has been going on long before Trump, is my point. This is something that what we're talking about right now is actually bigger than Trump. But what he did and what I saw when that happened was my civil liberties fall to the floor, because I didn't understand that. So when people bring up Martin Luther King, what do you think he would feel in today's world?
Well, I'll first say that if you studied Martin Luther King and you understand where his progression was towards the end of his life, he actually started to change his position in terms of protesting, you know? And if you look at some of the stuff that come into play with respect to some of his son's comments, right? I think his son made a post not too long ago about people utilizing essentially what I'll call Martin Luther King as a pacifier to shut the mouths of these protesters and to get them to be quiet and protest the way they want them to protest.
Exactly.
These are the same people who back in the day, Mr. Martin Luther King was one of the most hated men in America.
Right.
So you can't utilize Martin Luther King now as if you was his friend and you weren't his foe, and or your ancestors weren't his foe at the time when he was advocating peacefully.
Right.
And so I'm looking at this as just a simple mechanism to get people to do things the way that you want them to be done, which is problematic.
Sure. Right, because cap kneeling, was not acceptable, right? I just have to say this one thing, and I want to ask your principal, I'm not going to catch it, but I know. Listen, I just heard this on the way over here, and I don't want to forget. People had a problem with Kaepernick kneeling, and then yesterday we observed, and we've seen some officers kneel, right? But there's also the perspective that looks good, and while it might be well-intended, technically we're just dealing, the kneel from Cap wasn't good enough. So now when you have police officers kneeling, suddenly it's okay. There's just that hypocrisy I feel like we're constantly dealing with. But I wanted to throw that one to you, Principal Rahh, as well. Sorry.
No, I mean, hypocrisy is part of DNA of American history. And I think when you go back to talking about Dr. Martin Luther King and rest his soul, we got to also understand that, for white America to go back and to go back and to quote or to go back and to have this identification of Martin Luther King, let's not remember that he was assassinated.
Right.
By
a white supremacist.
So he was assassinated. So when we're talking about the progression and we're talking about a movement and we're talking about protest, which he identified as the language and it's the action of the unheard, I'm not going to speak on what he would think about or how he would feel, but just as a man, as a human being, it's only so much you can take. Mm-hmm. Right. And I talked to my students about this. And I said, I want you to take it where we're a Title I school. For my educators out there, we are 95% Title I school. That means for free and reduced lunch, 95% of my students get a free and reduced meal. So I want you to put that in context in our community. Let's say that a certain demographic of my students, although they were eligible for free lunch, I said you couldn't get it. Or I said every day you have to get at the back of the line. And I did that every day. And they came to me and they said, you know what, I'm getting hungry. I said, no, you can't eat today. And then that's 9th grade. And then that happens in 10th grade. And they said, please, can we get some? Usually sometime around, you're going to start rallying up and they may end up taking somebody else's food. Or they may end up coming and they may end up starting to fight because then it becomes a survival mode. And you go into feeling like you don't have nothing to lose and you got to come and do something. You got to stand up and you got to protest and you got to fight because you are not being heard and you got to advocate for yourself. And think about that and multiply that by 400 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I should
right?
to speak. So, yeah, I mean, I can't, and I'm not even going to sit here like I know I'm not the black person in the conversation, to be obvious, but I am a person of color and I have multicultural background. I'm also Muslim. I know what it's like to be told no, this and to be stereotyped and all of these things. But I have a question because I do want to talk about the movement. And to this, I'm actually going to bring up a screenshot for the visual audience. I'll read it for the audio, but it's actually an interaction between me and another person that I knew. I'm actually not going to lie. I rarely ever, at this point, I'm like, no, I can't let this go on. So I had a particular individual that I was associated with on Instagram. And I was actually speaking to somebody else. And I had said this. I said, I definitely agree. There was a conversation, but I'll show you the part I'm paying. I will follow it up with the question on what I'm talking about. My initial comment to someone was, I definitely agree. And that's why I said color of skin, to include a whole group of people who are constantly profiled. But that's the thing. The Black Lives Matter is predicated on the concept that all lives should matter, including theirs. It doesn't somehow insinuate that Black lives are somehow more important than another, but they deserve the same level of respect and consideration. That was my definition of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I just want to share a response that I got from this person who, and I am calling it out because she said, Your long-winded response added nothing, Aalia. The proclamation of the emancipation for which there is appreciation, nothing but a complicated response to try and make the statement inclusive of all. When people say Black Lives Matter, that's exactly what they mean. Nothing more, nothing inclusionary, just Black Lives Matter. I'd like for each of you to tell me what you think about that. And if you agree with me, if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll say I think you're absolutely right. And what we're dealing with here is a cloud of smoke. You're dealing with clutter. You're dealing with people trying to create confusion because they don't want to deal with the realities of what we're dealing with here. We're not out there killing the police. We're not out here protesting because of something we've done. We're out here because what continuously has happened to our people. White people are being targeted like that. And I guarantee you that's a big difference that we've seen over the last 50, 100, 400 years is if they were, we would be out there with them. And that's a fact. And we don't see it on the opposite end. So with respect to what Black Lives Matter means, you're absolutely right. It does not mean to the exclusion of anybody else. We're saying that, of course, all lives matter, which means that because all lives matter, Black lives matter as well. And so therefore we need the respect. We deserve dignity. We deserve to not be killed and slaughtered on the streets. I shouldn't have to tell my 5-year-old twins, or my sister shouldn't have to tell her 5-year-old son and daughter what's going on, why police are killing Black people. They shouldn't have to have that conversation today, 2020. And so to me, that's just a bunch of clutter. And I personally try not to even spend a lot of time on it because I understand that they're just trying to create confusion. When I was a defense counsel and I used to go to cases representing corporations, one of the tactics that I did to defend the case at trial is to create confusion. You create confusion, they don't understand what they're supposed to be ruling on. They don't understand a decision that they're supposed to be making at a certain time. That's all we're dealing with here.
Right.
Yeah.
Principal Rahh?
I think it goes back. It's this, history is so important. And as an educator, comments like that, I teach, right? And really understanding of when you're talking about systemic racism, we have to first understand, like, in slavery, is one part of it is the physical persecution and what's something that is very overt and what you can see. But also we got to understand that in slavery also had, we're going to strip you of your language. Mm-hmm. We're going to strip you of your education. We're going to strip you of your human rights and dehumanize you. We're going to also create a narrative about you, right? And we're also going to say, Carter G. Woodge said it in his book called The Miseducation of the Negro. If I can control a man's mind or can control a human race mind that they feel that they're inferior, I will never have to make them choose. They will choose it for themselves. Right? And we're talking about a narrative right now. If you look at mainstream narration of Black people in America, we're not in control of that. Someone else of a white-centered perspective is controlling that. So same thing with Black Lives Matter, the same thing with Colin Kaepernick, the same things are happening where a narrative is being twisted. And if you are not socially conscious enough to read between the lines and have the education, then you can fall in what I call a racial entrapment.
Sure.
Right? Especially if you're someone of privilege who is blinded by mainstream media. So with this context, you have to ask that person, do you understand your privilege?
Right.
And three things in regards to privilege, because I'm also a component of ethnic studies and Black studies, not only being taught in Black and brown schools for themselves to understand where they come from, but more importantly, in white schools, so they understand the reality, but they understand all the essence of racial disparities in America. And when it comes to privilege, you have to ask them, you see the really three things. Either you're someone who can identify with privilege and you want to use it for good. You identify your privilege and you say, I don't want to give this up. This is too good. Right. I'm someone, I want to keep this. Or third, you say, hey, this privilege is something that I acknowledge. And I also want to use it. And I also want to be able to empathize and work to get better at understanding, like, yeah, these things are wrong, right? And it goes back. So I really say that you are right, but I think education is so key, and we can't forget about the totality of this mountain that we're climbing with not just the justice reform that needs to be made, but the educational reform that needs to be made, and then also the wealth and economic reform that needs to be made.
Yes, I will say, I think that it should be said for the audience, when we're on this topic, we're not here to defend every single thing. I often hear people, well, what about black on black crime? We're not talking about that today. We are speaking about a system that somehow has breeded a culture of certain police officers, because we know not all of them. I actually just had on my interview a 30-plus year veteran of LAPD, signed up for all the right reasons, said, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be that good cop. And then you have the ones that I just flat out told him, but then you have the ones that don't. They have their own agenda, and they don't see, and there's this unconscious bias. And by the way, no one likes to think that they're racist. And but cold, and there's so many people that if you throw out that word, what you've said and what you've done. And by the way, I want to read something because I have 3 words here: discrimination, racism, and prejudice. Prejudice can be thought as a stereotype. It can be benign in that your boss may prefer brunettes, but it's possible that prejudice never inspires action and so doesn't either harm you or benefit you, right? That's one thing. In the case of discrimination, the issue becomes one of acting on racist thoughts. This can be intentional, as when a landlord decides they don't want to pay rent or they don't want to rent to Latinos. It can be also unconscious, as when hiring managers disproportionately employ white males while unaware of their unconscious bias and protesting that they're not racist. I only want to hire white men because they're more trustworthy, right? But I'm not discriminating. But racism is the belief that personality, behavior, and morals can be traced back to race, and that the belief that one race is superior to another. Thinking that Asian people are better at math is racist. You are attributing qualities to another person based solely on their race. Thinking that black people are more violent or more likely to steal is racist. And when you try to educate somebody, not in like this mean way, but saying, hey, that comment is kind of racist. Oh, I'm not racist, right? Like, how do you as black men view that? And how do we address that? How do we educate people more? Because it seems like with it's not working. You just see so many people, it seems like that. Principal.
You know what? Go ahead, BJ.
I was going to say, for one, I think we've had a lapse in communication. There was a period, and we keep talking about Martin Luther King, we keep talking about Malcolm X. There was a period where we were seeing a lot of marches and protests and stuff like that. And then there was a period where it's like the United States forgot racism exists.
Right.
And it's kind of like we all fell back in line and we all just tried to climb up the ladder. And for me, that's one of the things that I talk about when people say, hey, why don't you guys try and get professional? What do you think we've been doing the last 34 years? Right. That's why you see Obama as president. That's why you see certain people as district attorney. That's why you see certain lawyers and people in certain other positions of power. But the reality is racism is going to exist until we flush it out. And when we're dealing with discrimination and when we're dealing with prejudice, the acting upon that racism, that's always going to persist until the racism is flushed. We need to create a new set of ideological norms in terms of how we perceive things on a regular basis. What does that start with? That starts, for one, with the media. That's what Amen was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. The media has a narrative. Even now, during these protests, I was out protesting last week downtown LA because I live downtown, and I hear the helicopter. No, it was completely peaceful. They never publicized. It was never on TV. Why? What narrative did it fit? What narrative did it not fit for them at that time? At the beginning of these protests, even though they keep saying that these protests have been violent, we can talk again, like I said, about maybe why. But at the beginning of these protests, they start off nonviolent. They start off peaceful. And you see police agitating them. You see police or certain people coming in that have nothing to do with the protest, coming in and taking control of the protest. And these is all systemic areas and systemic ways that racism have taken place and continues to take place. And unless we flush out racism we're going to see people discriminating. We're going to see prejudice taking place on a continual basis.
Yeah, because that's kind of the problem. 4 officers were charged, I believe, in the Atlanta incident with the 2 the Spelman college student and I think Morehouse college student. They were viciously, once again, and that's kind of the problem, I would imagine. Like we're here, we are protesting police brutality against people of color, and then you keep doing it. I've seen videos of little kids getting hit with rubber bullets and maced, and like, how is that going to help this situation? How much power do you think law enforcement has to actually really, really snuff this in the bud and don't do it?
Look, so for me, and I talk with BJ a lot about it, I think what's really important, and going back to the racism thing too, it's big on the why, and I go back to history. I got Sankofa tatted on me because to know where you're going, you have to know where you came from, right? So in order for America to right its wrong and to repair the harm, we have to know where we came from.
True.
I posted on my social media. It was May 31st, which was 2 days ago. May 31st was the 99-year anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa massacre of Black Wall Street.
Yes. Right.
Where they went to go and massacre a community and go through, destroy buildings, and let's go before that. When we talking about capitalism and we're talking about enslavement and we're talking about these different things, it is for power, it is for money, and it is for greed, and it's for and it's scaled up. So to answer your question and back to this justice, because you have things that are police reform, and then you have the actual thing in regards to litigation where statistics show that Black and someone white who do the same crime, the Black person gets more time, right? Then you have the Black cop and even the white cop that does the same thing, the Black cop gets more time. Right. So you're talking about that, but in order to really, I feel, have and address racism, we must address it on a government perspective, but more importantly, in regards of an industry, money perspective, because let's make no doubt about it. The money that funds these politicians when they're campaigning, Joe Biden was just talking about, hey, looking for ways for people to donate to his campaign, and we need everything we can to get rid of the person that's in charge now. So these CEOs and business, at the end of the day, white America is going back and living in white America.
Right.
Like California is not, it doesn't look like the rest of America in all aspects.
Right.
So if you go to, like, there is redlining in a sense, it still exists right now. So if we really want to talk about, racism and really apply pressure, we have to apply pressure in regards of in their pockets, right? Mm-hmm. But also having what I always been preaching is public-private partnership that educates Black and brown, but also white, but there is a partnership, but it's backed by government funding. And pretty much what I'm saying is put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And have reform that is funded by the government that's directly to a company, nonprofit or profit company that is coming in to service as a liaison, but also training, but also give recognition to the diversity that we're trying to get forth and teach racism, but also then have reform that this is a hate crime.
Right.
So it has to be those things together, or the same thing. I feel what happened is because at the end of the day, the politician, those who are in the industry who have the billionaires, which is the macroeconomics, which Black and brown people are still underrepresented when it comes to the macroeconomics of America. We're gonna find ourselves still fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Principal Rahh, too, because you're right. Like, look, one of the reasons I am one of those people who can say I understand what privilege means. I'm half white. I grew up in a kitchen where, of course, I heard people say you can grow up and marry anyone. And I'm not saying this to bash my family, but it's just, and a lot of families are like this. It's not just whites, by the way. Latinos will do the same thing. Middle Easterners will do the same thing. You can marry anyone, just don't marry someone Black, right? Like, as if it's somehow. I have my oldest daughter who actually is part Black because of her biological father is part Black. And I remember just always everyone being so, is she part Black? Is she part Black? Is she part Black? And one day I was like, who cares if she is? What is your deal? Like, what does that mean? She is any less of a person? What is your point? Because we're Middle Eastern and we're multicultural, she's not allowed to be part Black. Like, it was ridiculous, the notion to me. But I say this to say that, after I got out of college, I did read about Black history. I read about the slaves who had to lay under floorboards to escape their slaves for months at a time. I read Harriet Tubman. I went and I learned that Black history that exists. I read about the babies who were born and sold off days after. I read about things that any white person in America would say, the hell you're going to do that to me and my family, right? But yet it's okay. I get so frustrated because we get taught in elementary school about what happened 700 years ago or whatever, 1,500 years ago. But let's talk about the more recent history and let's be honest about it. Of course, that narrative is not comfortable for most people. So that's probably why it gets hidden. But you personally, Principal Rahh, you founded this amazing, and I want you to actually discuss what your university does, your demographic, your kids, what's their ages, and what are your results right now?
No, thank you for the opportunity to talk. So I'm a founding principal, opened up a school pretty much in my hometown, Watts, California. I'm born and raised in Compton, so it is in Watts. We're known by University Pathways Public Service Academy. That's a long name, so we go by the U. So it was just a dream manifested to pay it forward to open up a high school and service students that look like me, that come from the same streets that I came from, to say, like, you can reach for your dreams, you can surpass your dreams, but you can do it in your own way. And it's okay to be who you are, and you got to change the world and don't let the world change you. So some of the things that we do, we are a public service academy. So my brother, BJ, comes and he founded the Law Society at our school. So he teaches our students how to become future lawyers, future sports agents, future just conflict resolution specialists, and just how to navigate in regards to the industry and legal studies industry. We have a firefighter academy. We have a music studio. We have an FBI academy, right? And in the context of the world, I think it's important to understand how these systems work. I'm someone that's a component of understanding that you may not like how America is run, but we need to understand how it's run.
Right.
So I think that's really important for me as a principal to provide our students with that and how to navigate through the system. We also offer an early college academy in which students can get college credits while in a high school at the same time. If they work really, really hard, they can do what I did, actually, graduate high school with a 2-year college degree. So these are some of the things that we just trying to offer our students in Watts to just really be what we call change agents. And that's our mascot. We are the home of the change agents. We're opening the school. Didn't want to name a mascot out of their animals, which is perfectly fine for different high schools. But more than ever, I guess in 2020 was the year of reckoning when it comes to the mascot, because more than ever, I think our students understand why we are called the change agents, because we're going to provide our students to be positive change agents for the community and ultimately the world.
That's incredible. BJ, tell us about your experience when you've gone in there. And again, like he said, such a good point. I mean, I tell my son this. I want them to understand that I don't feel like you should be raised in California or any state and not know how the taxes operate when you graduate high school. Like, how can we release an adult into the world and not equip them and have them really understand the ways that make you successful, right? And so how does it feel when you go in there to these youth and say, look at me, I did it, I persevered, I didn't, what does that feel like for you?
To be honest, I get inspired every time I go. These students are so much further advanced than I was at their age, for a number of reasons. One may be social media, one may be, it may just be the climate where we are with technology. And something that I know for a fact that it is because of what Amen has done at the school and setting them up with perspective. And perspective is everything. And so when I go to a school, listening in to the students and chatting with the students inspires me every single time. You're dealing with students who, quite frankly, you really have no idea what's going on at home. You don't know if they're getting bullied on their way home. You don't know if something's going on at home. And so they're dealing with a ton of trauma that you have to figure out how to deal with. And for me, have to deal with within this hour session of the class and hone it in and connect with them to a certain degree that they can listen, that they feel inspired, and it's mutually now, right? And so it's so many different elements that come into dealing with these children, and they are so intelligent. They want to learn. Of course, they get distracted sometimes with certain things. I get distracted as an attorney with certain things. Of course, we all do, right? And so it's just a matter of keeping them narrowed in. But you see so much potential, so much creativity. Part of the program that we do at the school is at the end of the program, each student gives about a 3 to 5 minute closing remark based on a fact pattern that we've created. And the creativity in terms of the legal arguments that they make. They learn the law swiftly. Some stuff that takes law students maybe a half a semester to learn, they learn it in a couple of weeks. And they make so many different creative arguments in a process. And that's part of the reason why I get so inspired. I love it. And it's just so much talent there. It's just about making them understand perspective. It's about making them understand that, oh, that is an avenue that I can actually pursue because you look just like me, right? And so one of the things that I do is I talk to them candidly, right? Just like I'm right now, I'm not in a suit, but I tell them I got tattoos, right? I want them to know I'm just like you. We are exactly the same. At the same time, they do see a professional aura about how I carry myself when I'm doing certain things. So they get a balance. But most importantly is for them to understand that they can go from point A to Z just like I did. Now, one of the things that I always encourage them to do is tap that person next to you. Always easier when you got a brother next to you helping you get there and you guys are helping each other. So to me, that's one of the biggest things that I feel is inspiration when I go to the school for sure.
This is a loaded question, but do you feel that sometimes with regards to the white and people of color in general, by the way, do you feel that that's one of the reasons why they say when you lift your brother as you rise, but then you bring them up to your level? Do you think part of the problem is they want to be on top? There's people, they just want to be the ones on top. You just have to have these people down here. Do you think that's, I'm just asking,
Are you saying with other African-American men or?
Oh, no. I mean, in general, with like the issue where white people view themselves as above blacks. Why don't more of them pull us up? Why don't more of them, or pull, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you pulling them up because once they're up here, then you're equal? You're no longer the superior, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that, of course, it's speculation as to each individual person, but generally speaking, I would say fear. And you look at racism, what's one of the foundational elements of racism is really fear. Why do you have to be racist? What are you fearing? And I think that's one of the things. Yeah, it's fear. It's one of those options that our men gave is you being socially aware, socially conscious of your privilege. But at the same time, you don't want to give that up. That's fear. You fear releasing the stronghold that you have. You feel maybe the security that your future generations have. And so, of course, I think that exists. Is that across the board? No. I have a lot of Jewish friends who are amazing. Right. I have some buddies that I work with of all races who are amazing. One of my closest friends is Jewish. One of my closest friends is Muslim, And so for me, I've seen people of all races who are amazing. I've also seen the opposite. And that's just the reality.
Yeah. If I jump in, I think it's important. And I would say, I don't know if you know the work of, I think his name is Richard Spencer. So Richard Spencer, he's very just honest and transparent about, listen, as a white male who comes from privilege, I acknowledge my privilege and I don't want to give up my privilege.
Right.
Right. And he's straight. He gonna shoot it to you straight. And I think, and there's a mass group that feels the same way, but there's also people that's like, wait, this is totally wrong, and we want equality.
Right.
Right. You ask him, do you want equality? He'll tell you straight to your face. He don't care if it was the almighty Elijah Muhammad there. He'll say no. So I think it's important to understand. You may not like it, but you got to understand the psyche of some people who are in position and who may not say that they want that, but their actions prove differently.
Sure.
And I would say that with America, look at the industry. One thing that we talked about before is one key current example is the medical marijuana industry. If you go and look into that, and you look at how many black and brown people are being incriminated over drug cases around marijuana, and then flip and see how many black or brown people are actually making money in that industry sector that's being legalized all across the nation and state by state, you will see that less than 5% are black and brown, and over 65% are white that's monetizing off of the legal marijuana industry. And why? Because government officials, money-backed sponsorships, and special interest groups make these things possible. And that's across the board in macroeconomics, from manufacturing, airlines, retail, all throughout Wall Street. It's evident.
Yeah, it's when you say that, it actually reminds me of how sorry, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I was listening to you. I hate when I do that. Listen, I do want to ask you a question though. What do you say to the officers, both white and others, including black, that tend to have the habit of profiling people of color? Like if I'm the officer who profiles people daily. What do you say to me?
I mean, that's a tough one. The reality is, it probably can be summed up in one word: why. And so it's not so much what I can say to you, it's what are your thoughts? Why do you think that way? Why do you believe that's fair? And so I think that's what I've been noticing relatively recently as well, is talking to people of other races. It's, well, BJ, can you guys do this? Can you guys do that? I've been in small group huddles with highly educated people of African-American race. And we've tried to figure out, is this the way to go about doing things? Is this the way to get change? Is that the way? And what I've come to realize is you got a group of people together who don't actually have the problem, because the problem actually exists where the hate is, which is on the other side of town. That's where things need to change. And so when we start talking about what it is that we can do, or what we can say, or what we ultimately cannot change your heart. If I'm laying face down on the ground and you have a 0 to 5 or 8 minutes to not kill me, and you decide to do so, how can I change your heart?
Right.
That's within. You got to know thyself. You got to do some self-reflection. All of this is to help people self-reflect. And so with respect to these police officers, they need to start looking at themselves, figuring out if they value life. Maybe they just simply don't. If you ask me, a lot of them don't. But there's another part. I should say some of them don't. But there's another part to this story. It's how they are being trained. Okay, because when you're talking about just profile, I'm talking about execution. But when you're talking, killing. But when you're talking about just racial profiling, these people, I know people that know what the training and the training looks like. And when you are someone who has an equal balanced mind, you have no social perspectives, even though you may have heard some things here and there, but you're fair-minded, you want to become a police officer, you're not African American, and you get these training videos and they see 3 guys rolling around the corner with a gun out the car and they look just like me, and they have a beard, or if you see a Muslim with a turban on and he's yelling out something, this is how they're being trained. This is hate training. This is racially inadequate training. And that's the reason why some of these cops who actually do have good moral standing, good moral character, are twisted in terms of acting out the actions in which their superiors or whoever's generating these training programs want them to act out. And it's problematic.
Yeah, because look at Michigan and I'm sorry, I do have to say this, when a bunch of white people roll up with freaking AK-47s and they're heavily armed, but yet all of a sudden everyone's so peaceful and then we'll just let them be. No, how can you not see that? Then you like it is a bit mind-boggling for me, and it's very stressful. I wanted to go out and protest just for the principle. The principle that we have a right to speak up. We have a right to say and listen, I'll be frank, I've been in the house because I have kids I'm taking care of, and anyone who knows I'm dealing with coronavirus. So I've had, I'm a vulnerable. I'm 3-time cancer survivor. I'm really not trying to catch it, but I'm not going to lie. Last night, I was like, give me a mask. Where's the nearest, where can I go? And I was like, well, I want to support this, not the looting. And this is something that was actually one of the things I know I was going to say. So you've got these young cats that are on TV. They're going into the Nike store. They think they're slick. I remember being young and stupid, by the way. I remember it clearly, and I admit it. Can you speak to those young men, by the way? I'm not trying to actually, I know I just kind of course changed there, but tell me your thoughts to those young men right now.
Well, I mean, I start. I think it's important to say this. I think it's important to identify and understand, not giving an excuse, but an explanation, right? And they say, like, you know what, we got to understand, like, America, I think we all can agree, it is a capitalistic world, or a capitalistic country. It's about capitalism. And capitalism, or the ideology of capitalism in America, has disguised racism underneath poverty, right? And when you combine racism off of, like, being born black is pretty much a crime, but being black and poor is devastating, right? So when you put years and years, we got to also remember 1955 was pretty much like the end of the Jim Crow era and the new Jim Crow. So when you think about 1955 to now, it's only been, 65 years?
Correct.
Right? So when you're talking about people with an ideology and they're like, you know what, I don't got nothing to lose. I have this mindset. I'm pent up in during a pandemic. The schools ain't been in session for months, right? People have been, over 40 million people are unemployed. Some people, we got to also remember, some people are unemployed and they don't qualify for unemployment because they had a different type of job that didn't get them, because that goes back to the wealth and the targeted racism of poverty. So when you get a group of people who feel like they don't got nothing left, and then, don't get me wrong, you got some knuckleheads out there doing it, but you get that, and you get pent up demand, you get all that level of anxiety, you get all that level of tension, you get all that, like, of why we don't have and why this, and you see maybe somebody that's not even black go in, break a window, you're like, well, shoot, let me go.
Right.
So again, it's not an excuse.
Sure.
Just giving the explanation. So I will say that for everybody out there, I just want them to be safe. I want them to understand the power of collective work and responsibility and unity and having a common message. It's up to me and BJ and platforms like this to understand that this is about racial disparity and equity, fair justice, and a mission and a plan to move forward. And unfortunately, we have people that's trying to hijack that, because it's like in my school, there's 5% that sometimes get distracted. If you came to my school and focused on the 5%, then sometimes you miss the 95% that's doing really great things. And that's what the narrative of CNN is doing in regards of seeing there's some great speeches out there. The power of the media can get us to focus in on, there are some casualty things. And I will say that it is wrong. There's some casualty things.
Yeah.
But throughout the years of this, it goes to, a revolution is never pretty.
No, it's not. Actually, I want to say something, because I said it on my last podcast. I said it on Facebook, and I just have to say it simply. I'm going to repeat myself, not the whole thing. As a 3-time cancer survivor, I've gone through chemotherapy. I'm part of a community that, in order to beat that ugly disease, of which I consider racism an insidious disease, I had to level my body. They tell you, you're going to take this toxic medicine. It may kill you. It could compromise your healthy organs. It's going to make your hair fall out, your skin fall off, your mouth sores, prepare for your fingernails to fall off, like the things that you go through. But we take that chemo because the destruction to our body is with the hope that we have a chance at beating this disease, the chance at beating those odds, being one of the B.J.Abrons who grow up and become a stinking attorney, or, a successful attorney, Principal Rahh, who's out there making change in his community daily. I took that medicine to have a chance to breathe. And I said this, and I would do it again. So it's a process. It's not pretty, but we go through it, right? So when I look around my neighborhood, am I frustrated? I'm like, oh, that sucks, but I'm going to be honest. I recognize that it's just a distraction from the point, which is police brutality is wrong. Profiling people of color, it's wrong. It needs to stop. Our police need to be accountable. And that's what I'm for, because I have one other thing to say. There's so many times we hear this word minority. United States of America, I need to let you know something. We're not the minority. We're told we're the minority. But if there's one thing you haven't seen, if you haven't gotten this down by these protests, we're not the minority. BJ, what do you have to say?
I mean, a lot of people ask me, well, what do we do to fix this? How do we solve this issue? How do we solve this problem? And there's no one way.
Right.
Amen talked about that before. We need to be hitting multiple areas at a time. And so obviously we need to change the infrastructure. We need to change the school system. We need to change certain people in political positions. But what I will talk about is you cannot build a house without foundation.
Absolutely.
That means that we need America first to acknowledge its wrongdoings.
Yep.
We need America first to acknowledge what has taken place throughout slavery, what's taken place throughout Jim Crow laws. And to help with that perspective, we talk about some of the worst events that have taken place in the history of mankind. We talk about the Holocaust, a horrific incident or event that should have never taken place. Absolutely horrific. 6 million people died during the Holocaust. There's other genocides, the Armenian genocides, which America has, as of last year, finally recognized as a genocide, where about 1.5 million people died. In the process of slavery and Jim Crow laws, 50 million people, not 6, not 1.5, and I'm not diminishing what happened in these other horrific events. We're talking about 50 million people killed, slaughtered, hung, burned, choked. 50 million. And yet today in this country, it has yet to be acknowledged as a genocide. And that's problematic. That's lacking foundation for growth. And it's something that Amen talked about earlier that's really, really, really important. That is another distinctive factor between those other genocides and this one, is they still have their religion and their language and their culture.
Right.
I speak English and English only. I can't tell you what my ancestors spoke. I can't tell you what my ancestors' religion was, because we were beaten and killed if we practiced religion, if we kept any culture, because they didn't know if we were plotting against them during the process of slavery. That's a completed genocide. I cannot tell you today, without trying to pull out all kind of information and some type of search in the dirt for all kind of stuff to figure out where my ancestors came from. That's genocide. And before we move forward, that needs to be acknowledged.
Yep.
Because there's one step that comes right after that, and that's the reason why it hasn't been. It's 40 acres and a mule. It's that promise that we were promised a long time ago. A long time ago. And America has yet to make good on its promises. And so we see a relentless cycle, because it fears making good on those promises. It fears us rising to a certain level because of some of the stuff that we've talked about. But foundation is the key to the house. You cannot have a home without foundation, and we need that.
I so agree. And you can't put windows up when you haven't even put the house walls up. And I feel like that's what people are trying to do. And as you guys say, and we went over a little bit, but I know it's just so important for me to let you guys say these things. And thank you for joining me today. I feel it's imperative that we know eventually the protest will die down, right? And quote unquote life will get back to normal. But this mission, even if everything stops today, it doesn't end. This doesn't stop. This is not okay. We're not okay with this. I'm an American citizen. I'm not okay with what is happening in my society. And I encourage other people to really step back and take a look, because it is so much. It's more than one perspective. There's not an easy answer. But like my husband always says to me sometimes, oh, well, that's difficult. I'm like, difficult is not impossible. And, like one of the points I speak on with the cancer, once I got past that chemo, once I got to the place where I could stop and rebuild my body, let the hair come back, and hopefully have a shot at a longer life. That's where we start. But we're so far from right there. And it's not right, because I can only imagine what it was like to be enslaved, to be taken, to be ripped of everything. And then on top of it, you people say, well, slavery ended, right? Now what do they want? What more? It's like, well, no, okay, you ended slavery, but then you still treat them like a second-class citizen. We know people signed up for the war to defend this country. And then they were, basically told, oh, go away afterwards. Nothing was given. Like you said, all those promises made, none delivered. And I have to say this, just from my perspective, it's important for the future of our world and our existence that we get it together. We are not multiple races. We are one. And, I thank you for your guys' time today. I thank you for coming and being a voice for your community. I know how much you both are passionate, and I can only imagine what it's like, Principal Rahh. I know you have children, you have, and then there's the children that you have at the school. I can't imagine what it's like, but I applaud your effort to continue, because I'm sure there's one thing that we can all agree on. We're not giving up. We're not going away.
Never.
Right?
And it's beautiful. I know. I just want to leave it with this. It's beautiful to be Black. It is beautiful to service my kids because, man, it's so many good people that come from just our culture and our heritage. And saying that doesn't mean I'm putting down anybody else's culture or heritage, but it's so proud to stand up and see Black and brown people, and to be a principal of Black and brown students, and to see them walk into their purpose. There's no better feeling in the world. So I just have to end with that. There's truly no better feeling in the world.
Thank you.
And I echo all that. And I thank you for having us on too.
Yeah.
People like you and your podcast is something that we need more of. I know it attempts to strike that balance between the conglomerate, the CNNs, the Foxes, and all of these stations that create whatever narrative they want to create. And you stay true to the ground floor. You stay true to the roots. You stay true to what humanity actually is about. And it's about love. And it's about care, and it's about coming together. So I really appreciate you, Aalia, for everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
that means a lot. You guys, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll let you go. You guys have a great time. But before you go, thank you everyone for joining us. B.J.Abron, you can catch him on Instagram. BJ, what's your handle again?
At B.J.Abron, A-B-R-O-N.
Principal Rahh, please spell yours for our listening audience.
Yeah, it's at Principal Rahh, and principal as school principal, that's the P-A-L, not the P-L-E. And then Rahh is R-A-H-H, 2 H's.
You guys, thank you. And everyone, thanks for joining us. I hope you gained a lot of value from this. And I really want to appreciate you letting us be unsugarcoated. See you next time. Bye.
All right, thank you.